Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to an episode of InRange. I'm here today again with the C&rsenal Rifleman, and we are at an invite-only low-light night match at the Rio Salado range.
Yeah, it's interesting that they turned this into an invite-only match because the first couple times they ran it, there was just such an overwhelming response to it.
Yep.
And it's always interesting that people will show up for a special event like low light that will never show up to the regular pistol match to perhaps develop skills that are necessary before coming to something more advanced like this.
Well, low light is pretty exotic, and it's an unusual thing that we get to participate in this. So what you're saying is that instead of going to say, let's say you're new to competitive shooting, this would not be the first venue you should try to go to.
No, there's definitely some unique safety concerns with running matches in a low light environment, and the ROs and match staff have to be much more conscientious about who's downrange and where people are at when the stages are being reset versus when the line's being called hot.
Which is why when this first started off as just a public, anyone could attend, there was issues, there were problems, there were safety concerns, there were people handling guns when they shouldn't be, or you couldn't see them, or they were just not new, they were new to competitive shooting in general, and then when they got on the stage, they really didn't know what they were doing, which was manipulating guns, lights, and magazines, and following the 180, and all the safety precautions all at once became a real issue.
Right, so having vetted competitors for this venue is very important.
Which is why this is invite only. But what we're going to do tonight is you are going to shoot with your gun, and I'm going to shoot with my gun, and we both kind of have the same pistol, right? We're both shooting what you call the Stealth Special.
Mine is a bit different because I don't have a comp on this one, and I don't have a full-size weapon light. I'm using what is my now everyday carry gun. It's a Glock 19 with a K-arm slide and Leupold Delta Point Pro and the Streamlight TLR 8 light and laser combo. So that light sits even with the end of the muzzle and doesn't extend past, so it makes it a little more convenient for everyday concealed carry that the package is smaller.
Okay, so I'm also doing something interesting then because I've got the brake on mine. Mine's the Roland Special or Stealth Special, the K-arms build. But instead of using any of the Streamlights or anything like that, I'm actually using something unique. I'm using an Olight PL Valkyrie. It's a little tiny mini light that actually goes on the end of the gun, and it's even smaller than what you got, but it charges with a USB cable, and when you first turn it on, it has 400 lumens of light, and then as you use it, for the first minute it says it runs at 400 lumens, and then it degrades over time as you continuously have it on, as it's a rechargeable battery power source. But you can always recharge it with a USB cable. What I don't want to get into in this video is how many lumens you need, or what the splash is like, or any of that focus stuff. What we're going to do is show both of our guns here on the table, the lights we're using, and then you're going to get first-person video from both your runs and mine, and you can see what these two lights look like in a under-the-clock dynamic environment. So let's move over to the guns on the table, and we'll talk about the gear itself. All right, Fagan, why don't you show us what you're doing with your gun here?
All right, so this is a Gen 3 19 frame that's been worked over by Wheatley II. The finger grooves have been removed. The trigger guard has been undercut, and what this allows me to do is get my hand higher on the gun and feel more natural on a compact frame with my rather large hand. The magwell we manufacture as well prevents the pinching of the bottom of my hand when I do reloads, and also forces my hand higher. So it makes the 19 frame that I never really liked shooting before because of the placement of the finger grooves and the pinch factor in the bottom of my hand, something I actually want to use. It also has the K19 Charlie slide. This one's milled for the Leupold Delta Point Pro. It has a standard Glock OEM barrel and the TLR 8 Streamlight weapon light and laser combo.
This is a light and laser, so you're kind of going into the future here. Green laser or red?
It is red.
Okay.
Red just stands out better to me. I've used red dots on pistols for a long time competing. I never truly felt comfortable carrying one every day until I had a lot of experience with the Delta Point Pro, so that's recent for me switching to in the past 6 months. And one thing I'll say about carrying a dot every day is that it does require more maintenance in the sense that you need to clean the lens regularly. Like I get a lot of lint and dust bunnies from carrying underneath my shirt. So every morning I check it, make sure the dot's still on, it's still centered over the iron sights, and I take a Q-tip and swab the lens with it to get any lint and debris out of there. And I know some people are going to make a comment about, well, why don't I have a comp on this one? Well, I clean my carry guns a lot more often than I do my competition guns. Mostly because carrying it every day, it gets foul with lint and debris, and in the summer in Arizona, you just sweat so much. I've actually corroded the inside of slides from just sweating over them over the course of an 8 to 10 hour workday. So I want to be able to field strip and clean this gun more easily than I can my competition guns with the compensators. That's one detriment to using the compensator is field stripping and cleaning the gun is made a little more difficult.
You're also part xenomorph. Why don't you tell us about how the light actually works? So give us a little run through on that.
So you can do momentary, by holding down and releasing, or you can tap it and it stays on.
Okay.
You can cycle through modes by holding down both pressure switches, and it'll, if you hold it, it should switch to the next mode. Should.
Okay.
But,
and then how do you activate the laser instead of the light?
well, they're both on at the same time. If you
Always both on.
Well, you can switch between modes by holding down both.
Okay.
It should cycle through.
Okay.
There we go.
Oh, there. Okay. Yeah, you got
I
it.
gotta click. You gotta hold it down, then click it.
Got it. Got it.
So.
Fair enough.
And the way I like to grip the gun, there's my normal thumb position. I just switch down there and hold it on and release. I don't like turning it on and letting it go. The only time I would do that is if I was doing one-handed operation. So.
Cool.
So I may just switch it to light only for most of the match, but there is one stage where I think it might be interesting to use the laser.
All right.
All right. So one benefit to this particular weapon light, particularly because it has lasers, you don't have to take it off the gun to change the battery. You just unscrew the lens at the front, battery drops out, put a new battery in, screw it back in there. And that's important because if you've gone to the trouble to zero your laser, you don't want to lose your zero every time you need to change batteries.
Makes a lot of sense.
One thing to be conscientious of, though, is that when you're putting pressure on it, if you're doing, constant, or you're doing hold it on and then release for momentary, is that you do cause some deflection with the polymer dust cover on the Glock frame. So you need to decide, do I want to zero it for when I'm doing this, or do I want to zero it for one-handed operation? I zeroed mine for one-handed operation when I think it would be more important.
So this is the Olight PL Mini Valkyrie LED weapon light, 400 lumens for the first minute, and then it has 71 minutes of runtime. It's supposed to throw the light about 75 meters. It says it's water resistant. I don't know. I can't speak to that. It's a Cree XPL high LED lamp. For the first minute, you get the 4 full 100 lumens, and then after that, it degrades. It's a rechargeable battery. But what's really cool about this is you can always be recharging your gun, so you don't have to worry about you need to change your batteries or not. As you can see, this is currently charging right now off of just a backup battery, but it's just magnetically held on. So if you had this next to your bed or whatever and you needed to use it, it just pops off. So you can just pop it on there, and that's constantly charging that. And you can see it's doing that right now, and that's charging the battery. And I know that I always have a full charge. I think that's a really interesting thing that they're bringing to the market with that. It's a little different than having to put in CR123s or whatever. So there's that. And then this is, again, this is a K-arm slide, Delta Point Pro. The Nuclear II has done all the same work to this frame that you saw on Fagan's or Sinister Rifleman's. Mine does have the brake on it, however. I don't think that's going to be an issue for in this low light. It doesn't make a difference, but especially with a red dot. But in this light, let me talk about this. So this one is the same thing that yours has. So you hold it and it stays lit, let go, or you can tap it on, tap it off, and you can use your trigger finger or your thumb. So I could tap it on, or just hold it and let go for a momentary, or I could do the same thing with my trigger finger. This seems like a pretty well designed light. It just has a little clip that just takes it on and off, which makes it pretty easy to put it on different guns. Kind of cool. And so I'm going to find out today how this Olight works in this low light match environment, and we're going to compare and contrast what these lights look like on the clock. Just call it.
If you're finished, unload, show clear.
All right, so the low light match is over. How did things go?
I think it went pretty well for me. It was a good test of my carry gun in conditions that you're most likely to use a carry gun in.
Low light.
Low light, yep.
That's one of the funny things about this is there's a lot of things that come out when you shoot a match in low light or shoot in any organized shooting environment in low light. There's a bunch of stuff that changes real quick.
You couldn't plan some of the stages nearly as well as you can in the daylight.
No, in fact, it occurred to me that if you were to set up a match like this where you didn't allow anyone to actually walk through the stage before they started, if you were to use only steel that was knockdown steel and have people set back from the stage when they went up to shoot, you could make this a very easily blind stage environment. And that would require you to do more scan and assess to determine where the targets are with your light.
Well, even then, I think we saw some people that planned stages today that once they got up there and the shadows changed and the light moved around as they transitioned through the course, they lost track of what they were doing, particularly on that one with all the barrels vertical.
Everything, like you said, the light and the angles and the shadows change. Everything in your perspective changes on what's going on the stage as well. The other thing that this is pretty much, people are going to mention this, I know they're going to mention this in the comments, is that we saw a number of people not using any form of light discipline. They essentially turn the light on at the beginning of the stage and they turn the light off at the end of the stage, because that really is the fastest way to shoot the stage, even though it wouldn't be the most tactically sound.
And this is a match, so some people are going to shoot it that way. I use a match like this as a training opportunity because we don't get to shoot in low light very often. And like I said, this was a good chance for me to prove out my carry gun in low light conditions. So, and I learned some interesting things doing it too, like the dot and the laser both being red on the first stage was kind of confusing initially.
Yeah.
Then I decided, well, I can just bracket the target vertically with both dots.
Because there's an offset between the two.
Yeah, one's from below the bore, one's above the bore, but if it's within those two dots, it's a hit. So
you know what you need? You need a laser that generates two dots, and you have the predator aiming sight.
The intimidation factor of that would be unparalleled.
Yeah, that would suit you quite well, especially with your helmet on and all that. So things went fairly well for me in terms of actually doing what I wanted to do, which was to test out that Olight light. We also learned something interesting today in that I was having issues with my Stealth Special Roll and Special Glock. Same issues I was having at Tiger Valley, in which the gun was cycling, but then I had to tap and rack to get around in the chamber. And you mentioned this. You go, when did you last change out the recoil spring? I'm like, never. It turns out there's actually a cycle to the Glock springs that wasn't even something on my radar. This is my only Glock.
Right, so Gen 3 Glocks should have the recoil springs changed every 3,000 rounds. Gen 4 and later can go up to 5,000 with a dual recoil spring system. And what you were having happen was with the spring wearing, the slide was cycling faster than the magazine could feed it.
Yep. And so you'll see this. So what we landed up doing is taking your Glock 19 spring out of your gun and putting it in mine for the final stage, and it completely fixed the problem. This means we misdiagnosed the issue at Tiger Valley. It wasn't the ammo.
Yes.
It was the spring.
Sorry, Bear Ammo. We thought it was low pressure because going to NATO spec ammo solved it, but it appears that it actually was the recoil spring.
So there's a maintenance cycle, and I did not maintain it, and that was my fault, so I paid the price for that. But in regards to that, what I was more interesting about is doing the light. How was your light? Was the light bright enough?
Definitely bright enough. The only visibility issues I had were when I had fired enough rounds in sequence that there was enough smoke in the air that the light backlit it, and I had to wait briefly for the smoke to clear.
That's something you don't see in anything but in low light environments. In a regular ambient light environment like sunlight or with regular lighting environment, that smoke that comes out of even smokeless powder or even the projectile's lubricant, you don't really see it. But when you're using a weapon mounted light, it becomes very more prominent.
Right. And these stages were pretty interesting. It gave you some options on how you shot it. The last stage we shot was interesting in that it allowed me to play to the strength of having a dot on the pistol and take some longer shots rather than going all the way up on them. And that was interesting. And it was a good challenge too because I went for head shots on the poppers and took the plate rack from a further distance. The only real problem I had on that was when I had shot enough rounds at the plate rack that for a second it was obscured with the smoke.
I will say this, a red dot mounted on your slide in low light, regardless of if you have a weapon light or not, is a huge force multiplier.
And we saw a lot of people out here using those tonight that don't normally use them for anything else.
The red dot, you can see a red dot regardless of the lighting conditions, and you can still aim even if you're aiming at what looks like a shadow. Of course, do not engage a target unless you know what the target is you're engaging, but you can still, if you know that's a target you need to shoot, and you don't have a weapon light, that dot allows you to aim in a way that you couldn't, much more easily than you could with standard irons. So I will say this, the Olight, which I don't know about the reliability or the resiliency of it yet, this is the first time I've used it, it actually worked really well. I had no issues with it. It was easy to activate, easy to turn on for momentary and for permanent. and it gave me more than enough light with its 400 lumens for this environment, which is within, what, 25 yards? No issues whatsoever, more than bright enough. Is it bright enough for all applications? I don't know. You guys can fight the lumen wars in the comments. I don't really care. The light worked really well for me, and at this point, I'm kind of happy with it. And one thing I'm going to do right now is we're going to set it up and charge it off my external battery so that I can have a perfectly charged weapon light in my car on the way home. So let's do that. All right, Fagan, so why don't you take your spring back, since my spring is the one that's thrashed, and we shouldn't leave you with a thrashed spring.
And you know, just like doing preventive maintenance on your vehicle, the same thing applies for round counts on firearms.
Nonsense. I pick up a gun 100 years old and it still works. That doesn't make any sense to me. These Glocks are newfangled things that wear out quickly.
Well, the good thing is, all these parts are relatively inexpensive. I think a new recoil spring's like around $10, so you can easily replace them on a regular basis.
Yeah, obviously, I'm kidding, guys. Proper weapon maintenance matters, and I just didn't do it on this Glock. Wasn't really paying attention to the round count, and I exceeded the spring capacity, or I wore the spring out.
And what I'm actually looking at here is, I don't see any damage, but if the spring gets too weak, you can actually start having impact damage against the frame in this spot that will actually make it mushroom out, but it doesn't look like any of that occurred.
You know, from a historical perspective, I'm glad that there's no damage. But when the spring wears out, like he was saying, that eventually the actual slide will be reciprocating hard enough to actually damage the frame. I've seen that in a very historic gun, the P08 Luger. If the springs are not strong enough, that toggle link, as it flips open, will actually start getting cracks in the rear toggle, or the rear knee. Same exact problem. But also, let's go ahead and get this light charged up, which is really cool. So I've got just a backup battery here. I'm going to turn the backup battery on, and we put this little doodle on, and boom, we're now recharging our weapon light without having to change out batteries. I think that's a really cool feature on that, and it's something worth considering. Again, whether we want to argue about lumens or not, or light focus or diffusion, I don't know, but this feature is really cool, and the fact that it's just quick to attach, should I need it to be, is a really neat feature. So I'm going to go ahead and say right now that I'm pretty happy with the Olight, and I'm happy with how it worked on the gun, and we will shoot with it more to find out more later. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, thanks for watching another episode of InRange. Hopefully you like this kind of stuff. We try to bring you something unique, such as these sort of interesting new weapon lights that you can recharge with a USB interface, stuff that you don't see on a lot of other channels, and that is because of people like you on Patreon that support us financially, because this channel is supported only through direct viewer support. We get no monetization from any ad revenue or anywhere on YouTube or anywhere else. However, we do things like preview K-Arms weapons, which you built that pistol for me, so that's full disclosure on that. But I didn't change the spring out enough, did I? But that said, that's not the K-Arms fault, that's my fault. But guys, if you like this kind of stuff, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Subscribe to one of our channels. You can find them all on InRange.tv, and share with your friends. Thanks a lot.